Okay, I'm gonna get started. Hopefully you can see my screen. Okay, great. I'm gonna get started. If everybody could just save questions until the end, I would appreciate that. I feel like that would be the most organized. Chat is disabled. Okay, let's see if I can enable the chat. 1 second. Chat. Hmm. Okay, try now if you don't mind. Whoever just posted chat is disabled. Okay, if it is disabled, then we can just use the Q&A box because that seems to be working. I don't know why that would be. Okay, I'm gonna go back to sharing and we can get started. Thank you for your patience. Okay, thank you everyone for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. I'm excited. This is something that I really wanted to do for a very long time. I just found I worked with a lot of mental health related organizations, either directly mental health related or something very adjacent in the fact that they dealt with very sensitive topics. And it made marketing very, very difficult. And every time we did one of these projects, we would kind of be like twisting ourselves into pretzels and trying to figure out, what the best way would be to approach the issue. And over time, I came up with certain steps and processes that I really want to share and hope that it will help. So again, if you have any questions, the Q&A box does seem to be working and I can get to them at the end. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I think it's a lot of information and I know everyone is busy and has a lot to do. But after it's over, I will explain some different ways that you can follow up with me and get more resources if there's anything that you are not, that didn't feel like I explained enough or anything you want to learn more about, we can do that. So I want to talk about the different challenges that you might have when trying to fundraise or market for your organization. So you can tell me if you have any other, other examples of things that you have dealt with, but these are the most common challenges I've encountered. So number one is stigma, especially in the frum community. Admitting that there's a problem, talking about a problem is such an issue that it's really hard to even start marketing if nobody even wants to just even have a conversation about it. Now, we've come a really, really long way. I think that the community has really changed since I've entered the space. And in the beginning, it was like there were things that no magazine would publish, nobody would talk about it. Now it's in the magazines, it's on podcasts, there's conversations happening, there's people coming forward. So it's a huge shift that I think that we could all be very grateful for and take advantage of. However, we still have a way to go, and I think that organizations are still feeling the issue. Privacy concerns, that's a big one also because you have these people that you're helping, but you can't exploit them. And their privacy is really, really important to them. And though it's also really, really important to you. So I think that that's a real challenge because you want to be sensitive and you want to make sure that the people who come to you for help can trust you, but you also want to promote your organization. You need support. Limited budgets and resources, that's a big one for all organizations. You're all trying to do a lot. Everybody's wearing multiple hats and there's only so much that can be done. Marketing tends to fall to the bottom of the pile. Feels like a luxury, feels like something that you do when you're flush with cash. That's not true, different conversation, but marketing kind of gets the last attention and that obviously leaves you struggling. Complex messaging. So we're talking about sensitive topics and where do you even start with, how do you share it with people? How do you make sure, number one, it's not triggering? How do you make sure you're giving it over sensitively, that people really understand what you're trying to do? So sometimes I find organizations will kind of opt to say nothing or to be really, really vague. And that does absolutely nothing. I mean, vague power of messaging really doesn't resonate. And that becomes a huge challenge. Diverse audiences. So this is a big one. You have donors, you have recipients, you have their family members. Who are you saying what to? How do you figure out where to divide the messaging and which messaging to prioritize? Which needs to prioritize? That can become a really big challenge. Competition for attention. So this is, there's just an organization popping up every day. Everyone needs our support. Everyone wants us to come to something, to donate to something. who's not being hit up by some kind of link or being advertised some kind of event at any given moment. So how do you break through that noise? And lastly, building trust, especially if you're talking about the issues of mental health. You can't just pop out of the woodwork and say, hey, we help with this cause. People really need to be able to trust you, that you're someone that they really knows what they're talking about, can really help them, is going to take all of their issues into account, et cetera. So that's, it's really, really important that we address all of these issues. So before I go into what the solution could be, I just want to talk about what the goal is, because to say the goal is marketing, very, very vague. And even to say the goal is, let's say, I want to help 100 new people, I want to raise $50,000. Those are good goals. And it's important to have very concrete, breakable goals. But I want to give you a big picture goal to reframe the word marketing in this context. And the goal I want to say is you want to build a movement, not an organization. And why do I say that? An organization is your business. If I am involved in your organization, if I'm supporting it, okay, I'm covering your overhead, I'm helping you accomplish one goal, it doesn't move me. A movement is actually the process of moving something from one place to another. What you're trying to do in the world is cause change. You're trying to do something really, really big. You cannot do it alone. You're fighting inertia. It is so much easier for people to do nothing. And in most cases, they will do nothing. You're trying to really change. If you are working for an organization, if you started an organization, you spotted a problem and you want to go out and fix it. You can't do that alone. You cannot do that alone. The needs are too great. The jobs are too much, and it's so much easier to promote a movement than an organization. It's so much easier to get people to be involved if it's something that they feel aligns with their values, makes them feel like they're part of something greater. And that's something you could only accomplish when you create a movement. So what we're going to be talking about is the marketing steps to create a movement. And just a cute little side note of something I've been thinking a lot about. I am a huge fan of swag. This is it sounds like such a silly thing, but when you're creating a movement, you're giving people a baseball cap, a sweatshirt, a tote bag, a bumper sticker, something that they can say, I belong to this movement. This is who I am. This is who I identify with. That the power of that is just so tremendous. And it's something we can talk a little bit about more, but the point of the framework that I'm going to present to you is to answer 5 magic questions. And they're magic because they're so simple. Sorry to be cheesy, but they're just so simple. And if your audience can answer these 5 questions about your organization, you are solid. You have figured it out. And the questions are, who are you? What do you do? Why should I care? What can I do? And does my contribution matter? Seems really, really simple, but think to yourself right now, how many people could actually answer all 5 of these questions right now? And that's what we're going to try to solve with this framework. Now, framework may sound like a little bit of an intimidating word. It's not. It's really, really not. It's just a way to get organized. It's order of operations. Because if I asked you today, in what order do you do marketing? I would not be surprised if you did not have an answer to that question. What do you mean in order? But things that are important, things that are hard, need to be done in an order. Imagine if you were trying to build a house and you said, okay, contractor, plumber, electrician, show up. I have some bricks, I have some nails and some wood, and can you build a house? They would look at you like you were nuts. There's an order of operations. You need to hire an architect. You need to get plans. You need to get those plans approved. And you need a contractor to review those plans. There's an order that this stuff has to happen, or else nothing will happen. So it's really, really important just to look at this framework as an order. It's not complicated. It's probably things you're doing anyway. You're just not doing them in an order, and you're not doing them intentionally. And doing that, what you're doing anyway intentionally, makes all the difference. So just for fun, I noticed after I put this together that the acronym is PCAN. Doesn't have anything to do with anything, but it's fun, helps you remember. The steps are plan, educate, connect, activate, and nurture. And the really cool part of this framework, which I call the marketing to movement framework, because I said we're really trying to create a movement here, is that it's a double duty framework. So if you look at the top over here, the top is the impact side, and the impact is the actual work of your organization, what you're doing, how you're helping. And on the bottom, you have the fundraising side, because we all know nothing can happen without fundraising. If you're not doing fundraising, you don't have the money to support the mission, nothing ever happens. So what we're going to do is, with this framework, we're going to be hitting both sides of your challenges. On the impact side, you're turning your audience right here into recipients of your services, into advocates, into ambassadors. And on the fundraising side, we'll be turning your audience into a community, into volunteers and donors, into ambassadors. And you land up with this amazing army of fundraisers, of ambassadors, of advocates who will help you grow your organization. So again, I'm going to run through these steps fairly quickly. We can do a Q&A afterwards. I'll promote to a panelist, anybody who wants to get on camera and talk about their specific organization or challenges. But really each one of these steps could be a webinar in and of itself. That's the truth. I am simplifying it because it should be simple, but there's a lot that can be spoken about. So I know I speak fairly quickly. We can get to everything afterwards. I also created a chat, a WhatsApp chat that I'll post a link to, hopefully after this. And then anybody who wants to talk more about any of these topics can join. Okay, so let's dive in. Plan. So like I said, it's important to have an order of operations. Imagine if you, I love metaphors. I apologize for that, but imagine if you decided that you want to lose some weight or get into shape. So on Tuesday, you went to the gym, and on Thursday, you ate a salad, and then the next week you took a walk. Do you think you would see any results? Pretty obvious the answer is no. For some reason, that is how most organizations, really most entities of all kinds do marketing. I call it RAM, random acts of marketing. A sponsorship here, an email here, a campaign here, a webinar here. It's a little bit of everything. There's no consistency, there's no follow-up. And then they look back at their marketing efforts and they're like, why is this so frustrating? Why isn't this working? Why don't people know who we are? It's because you're missing the planning step. So in the planning step, we're answering the question. Remember the 5 magic questions. Who are you? Who is your organization? And you cannot properly answer this question for yourselves, let alone anybody else, if you don't go through the steps. And you may be thinking to yourself, I know who I am, but let's take a step back. If you ask 10 different people who are involved in your organization, what is your mission? Could they spit it out? Are they going to say the same things? You might be surprised. Very often there are differences of opinions, and this can get really, really messy. So before we do anything else, we want to iron this out. You want to have crystal clear clarity who you are. That starts with research. Don't get intimidated by the word research. Sounds like tedious, annoying. It could just be speaking to people. You just want to make sure, whether you're just starting out or you've been doing this for a while, that there's clarity around what your mission is and where you might need to fill in what that is, and the strategy around getting to where you want to go. And clarity around your mission and your vision. Your mission is the problem that you set out to solve. The vision is what the world looks like when you solved it. Is that clear? Does it need to be updated? Does the messaging around it need to be updated because your organization has changed path? Or there's so much misconceptions that you need to readdress? That's really important. And once you have that figured out, is the branding step. People don't like the word branding. I know it brings to mind like expensive logos and these long like presentation decks with colors and fonts that nobody really needs. Branding is just the process of going out and answering the question to the world, who are you? I don't know if anybody here is a fan of Carl Jung, but he says, the world will ask you who you are. And if you don't have an answer, they will tell you. And this applies so well when it comes to organizations. If you're not doing the ing part of branding, you will get branded by forces completely outside of your control, by something that their neighbor said, or by their impression of the ad that you put out, by a million things that are not what you want. So it's really important to be aware that it is your job to go out and tell people on a constant basis who you are, and to have a setup in place, an infrastructure in place that supports that at all times. So that leads me to, once we have that figured out, step 2 is educate. Now, a lot of you are probably doing this anyway, but again, like I said, not intentionally, but to me, this is your mission. Whatever it is that you set out to do, the first piece of it is educating people as to what the problem is, what the details of the problem is. If you're not educating them, then what are you doing? Like, really think about it, how much a core part of your mission this should be if it is not already. And the things that you can accomplish just by setting out to educate are actually fairly incredible. So you're telling people, you're answering the question of what do you do, but you're also accomplishing goals as you can go out there and reduce stigma. So if you're talking about, if you're an organization that deals with really private personal information that nobody wants to talk about, let's say, anxiety or depression, and you're going out there and you're starting the conversation, you're going on a podcast, you're writing an article, you're showing people there doesn't have to be shame. That is a huge step that you are taking to reduce the stigma, change the perceptions, reduce the shame, and making people more likely to come for help. Also prevention. So this is a big thing that I think is being addressed more, that so much of what is being addressed could have been fixed before. So I'm working with a couple of organizations now that are on the prevention side of things. They're going back to the root of the crisis and they're addressing it there. Children, families, and there's such incredible things that can be done to not ever need to get to the crisis. But then the third piece of it is crisis support. If you don't go out and educate people that you're out there, you're available to help, they won't know where to turn in times of crisis. And that is the biggest piece of your mission that you should be doing. So I want to just, before I go on to the next step, explain to you that what you're doing in this step is you're building an audience. Really, really important. Right now, the general public who may or may not care about the work that you're doing, you need to turn them into an audience. How do you do that? You build a list. Now, this is not such an exciting part, I'm not going to lie, but it is really, really important if you want to get to the next piece of the puzzle, which is connecting with your audience. You need to have a list to connect to. So a list could be as simple as an email list. Sounds old-fashioned, but it works. It really, really works. It could be a WhatsApp chat that's pretty popular now, WhatsApp group or WhatsApp broadcast list, WhatsApp status, get people to sign up, and these are really powerful. You can also use social media. You might be doing that. I don't recommend it as like your first line of defense because social media platforms own you and they can delete your account from one day to the next. They can change the algorithm. They can really, really mess with you. So you don't want to rely on them as your first tier audience. And that's why email is yours forever. It's your list. There's no algorithm. I mean, you can't promise that people will read it, but they do get it no matter what. And if you're on social media, people may never even see what you post and you have very little control over that, or you have to put money behind it. So really at every step of the way, what you want to be doing is getting people to sign up for your list. Every event that you have, every ad campaign, every touch point. Hey, can you sign up for my list? Can you sign up for my list? Give them an incentive. Say, you know, this is the information that we'll be providing, or you can find out about future events, or we'll give you this free resource. Incentivize people, but you want to keep growing that list. It's going to be your most powerful asset. So it's not something that you've done. If I give you any one piece of advice that you take today, walk away from this and start your list. Okay, now we get to move on. We've built our audience. What's the next step? We want to connect with them. Now, the really nice part about making this sound less intimidating is the fact that you don't need everybody. No organization, no matter how lofty or huge your goals are, need everybody to connect with you. The way I view it is if you've been involved in like B2B marketing, you have a funnel, right? So you get people on the top of your funnel and then you slowly like weed people out. So you get to the hottest leads at the bottom, you sell those to those leads. With a nonprofit organization, we don't want to weed anybody out. Instead of a funnel, it's a circle. So we have this circle of all the people, everyone in our audience is inside the circle. And we want to bring the people who will care more, who we can activate more into the inside of the circle. So nobody's being left out. There's a reason for everyone to care about. Some people by default, if we help them along, will care more than others. So this is why at this stage, we really want to actively connect with our audience. And we want to basically turn them from an audience into a community. So I just want to quickly, before I go into that, go back to the top, the impact side of the framework, and remind you that because you're going out there and you're educating, there are going to be people that see you and need you, and they're going to turn into recipients. And that's the impact side of things. But now we're going to talk about the connecting from the fundraising side of things. We want to build a community. So how do we do that? Stories is a big one. I think this is probably something that you know about. Stories are really, really important. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but it's a really great way to connect with people on a deeper level by giving them your stories of transformation on a consistent basis. And personalization, that's also really, really important. There's a lot of like cookie cutter campaigns out there that feel like it should be connecting, but it's somebody like laid it out A to Z. It's not so personal. It doesn't really give me a chance to put my own stamp on it. So I don't really feel more connected. You really want to give people an opportunity to kind of connect, but in their own way. And the best way to do that is just ask, like put out some feelers, have a quick phone call with people who you know have connections with in the past, and just say like, what resonates with you? What are you looking for? Do you have time and talents to give to us? And you can kind of get a feel what will connect with them the most, as opposed to just being like, here's our campaign, here's our activity, here's what you can do. The big piece of this is events and experiences, the most powerful way to turn a general audience into a community of supporters. And I put these two examples in because it applies really, really well to the mental health professional world, where you have, let's say, like your first line of defense. So it could be like college teachers, makeup artists, therapists, like the professionals, doctors who are between you and the people that need your help. And you can facilitate opportunities for them to connect. And this is important, not to connect just with you as an organization, but with each other. And you're the facilitator. That's really, really important. And then on the recipient side, support groups are the people that either you've served or for people that fall into the category of might be served. We're really building a community and we're answering the question, why should I care? You have this organization. I don't necessarily need you right now. Or I don't have a family member that needs you, but why should I care? And you can give me a reason to care. You can turn us into a community, super, super powerful. Think about your community that you may have where you live. If you live in Brooklyn, don't listen, because I grew up in Brooklyn. I didn't know what a community was until I moved. I live in North Woodbury now, and it really is a community. And, you know, if there's a simcha or God forbid a tragedy, it may be someone that you've never spoken to, but people step up. And this is how you make your organization recession-proof, war-proof, pandemic-proof. The people in your community, they don't need you to spend a ton of money on an ad campaign. They don't need the economy to be in a good place. They don't need splashy incentives. They don't need raffles. They don't need concerts. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you know how I feel about all of this stuff. They just need you guys to give them the opportunities. And we'll talk about the opportunities more, but you built this community. This is the most powerful step that you have. And this is something that you should be focusing on constantly, is how do we build our community? How do we grow our community? The community can live on WhatsApp. The community can live on Zoom monthly events or in-person events, and it can grow organically. Again, you just want to facilitate. You're not bullying people into doing anything. You're giving them a space to connect. You're supporting them. You're empowering them. You're providing the resources and the haskamos, whatever it is that you need to do. But that's this step. Okay, we're going to move on. And again, I'll take questions at the end if I'm going too fast. The next step is to activate community members. And this is how you kind of level up. So when you have a community, ultimately, you're not going to have everyone at the same level. You're going to have less engaged. You're going to have more engaged. Interestingly enough, when I first created this framework, which was a couple of years ago, the A stood for ask. And it was just like this kind of standard fundraising, like, you know, once you have these engaged audience, you just ask them for money, ask them for something. And I realized that that's leaving so much opportunity under the table. When you actually activate people who care, the potential is just infinite. There's so much. You're answering the question, well, what can I do? Now that I care, what can I do? So obviously donations are the go-to. They're really, really important. We want people to donate. But there's so much more that people can do. And I think this was really, really shown after October 7th, when people stepped up. We had these like pop-up packing centers, and people were they took the opportunity to do. But in most cases, you know, thank God, you're not going to have this immediate crisis and drama. You have to kind of create it. You have to give these people a call to action. You have to give them a reason to step up, a framework to step up, an opportunity to do things. They can become ambassadors. They can become advocates for your organization. They can volunteer. Really think through. And again, going back to step one, if you did the research and you know your audience and you'll know in what ways they might be able to do more, this is an opportunity to really increase the impact the organization has, because it's no longer just you. You have this army. I don't know if any of you are familiar with like the concept of an MLM, a multi-level marketing campaign, where it's like Arbonne, they have like leaders who then have other leaders. And it has a little bit of like a shady connotation, but in this connotation, it's really, really great. You're creating an army of people who really care. And again, the potential is tremendous. And I'm happy to give suggestions of different ways that you can really activate your community. But we can do that at the end. So the last step is the nurture step. Now, nurture is a kind of a old-fashioned word, I guess, in the world of fundraising. Is like, you think of it as just like thinking. Nurturing is thinking. But we're looking at it a little bit differently here, because we're answering the question of, am I making a difference? You connected with me, I care. You activated me, I'm doing something. Does it matter? Like, does anybody notice the work that I'm doing? Show me. Much more than a thank you letter, so much more than a donor appreciation dinner, is show me that I'm making a difference. And that could be such a simple thing. I would say, if I can give a suggestion, is like block like a few hours on your calendar, let's say twice a month, to go through the people that you've activated and to reach out to them, take them for coffee, send them a voice note, send them a video, have a chat with them, and just say, look what you're doing. Look what you're accomplishing. Let me show you this transformation that happened because of the work that you're doing. And that goes such a long way, because people need that constant pull back in, because gravity will sort of, I think, pull them back out. Life has a lot of responsibilities. You're not making them feel like they're making a huge difference. People can fall away, and it's always going to be easier to retain the people that worked with you over time than it is to find new people constantly. So the nurture step is really, really important. So I just want to go back to the impact on fundraising side of things. So this is how, when you activate the recipients of your service, you can go back and do this the same way. You can reach out to the people who you've helped, and they can become true advocates. And you can reach out to the people in your community, and they can become volunteers, donors, ambassadors, whatever it is. And these people become your fundraising army. So I hope this came out as simple as I wanted it to. It really, if you look at it closely, it's probably things you're doing anyway without thinking too much about. So we just ordered them, and we put them into a simple path that you can just sort of cycle through over and over. You want to keep going back to all of these steps, kind of not simultaneously staggered, but over and over. You don't want to do one and forget it. You want to keep going back, and this is how your circle will grow and grow, and you'll have more people move into the center, more people helping you do the work that you're doing. So I want to go back to where we started. I think I addressed a lot of the challenges with this framework of the challenges that you have as an organization dealing with sensitive topics. But these two I did not get into so deeply because none of these steps will really help you address the issues of privacy and stigma. What do most organizations do? Most organizations, they do like anonymous stories, they change details, they, use testimonials that are kind of vague, a lot of stock photography, actor portrayals. They focus on aggregate data like statistic trends. They put together these, beautiful charts. It doesn't really resonate. I've seen it all. I've seen I think we've all seen, I haven't seen it so much, but like the video of someone in the shadows with their voice change, telling their stories. It's so cringy to me. It only perpetuates any shame, any stigma around getting help. And I think it's really, really sad. And I think that we should move away. The world is moving away. So what are some things you can do to help? Before I go into this, I just want to say, don't assume that people are obsessed with privacy as you think they are. There are many people who feel very empowered by helping others, by sharing the things that they've gone through and giving other people a chance to learn from them. And it could be very cathartic to some people. So I don't think it can hurt to ask. You probably will get a sense of who you should never ask and who you might be able to be like, hey, we're running this campaign. People who've been helped by your organization are probably going to be very grateful. So don't assume that people won't want to have their stories told or won't want to get, share their stories themselves. Even if it's on a really intimate personal level, like someone may not want to do a video that gets blasted out in a mass campaign, but they might be willing to stand up in front of an intimate audience of, let's say, 25 high-level donors and tell their stories. But let's just say we're taking that off the table. You don't feel comfortable asking or nobody's saying yes. What are some things you can do? So in step 2, we talked about education. These things really help because when you're doing these type of educational campaigns, you're erasing the stigma, you're getting people one step further to getting help. And you can integrate authentic collaborations with influencers and ambassadors. So influencers are people who have already decided that they would rather go out there and kind of put their privacy second because they want to do something. So they're influencers who are already talking about mental health, and you can bring them on board in a very collaborative, authentic way to help with your organization. And you can have some sort of ambassador program where you're formally, let's say, training people to share stories in a sensitive way, in an appropriate way, and really tell your story. So that's number 1. Number 2, again, going back to what we talked about in the connect phase, hosting community events and webinars, giving people a chance to show up, but they don't have to identify themselves. They can just say, I'm here because I'm interested. They don't have to say hi, I'm suffering. And this gives them a chance to meet you face to face, to build relationships, create content that you can use for your marketing purposes, bring on experts that they know that they can trust, that they can learn from. This also helps with some of these challenges. And then I want to just bring up, I think it's a topic on a lot of people's minds, where does AI fit into this conversation? So I think that we're at the cusp of a really interesting time, and AI generated imagery can have a huge impact on your marketing materials, whereas you might have to hire a photographer, spend thousands of dollars and hope you get a video shoot. And then, the people in the shoot are not super comfortable. AI really addresses all of these issues where you can generate emotional, compelling imagery to use for your campaign. It's cost effective, it's time saving, you can have really consistent branding in all of your images, and you can have diverse representation that can be really hard to find. So we're still at the cusp with this. I don't know where it's going to go, what concerns might pop up. To me, it is very different than using stock photography or actors, which is, something that's been very, very acceptable. For some reason, when it comes to AI, people become a little bit more indignant about, whether it's ethical to use it or not. So, the conversation will be happening in real time, but we've already started using it for our client campaigns. And honestly, it's pretty powerful. And I think the potential is really, really there for organizations who are prepared to use it. I don't think we should use it to replace moving people along to be more open to sharing their stories. But I think that we should really be talking about it more. And that's something I hope to do more of. So a few last things to keep in mind before I open it up to any questions. I see one just popped in the chat. I'll get to that in a second. A few important things I want you to keep in mind that I didn't touch on when I spoke about the cycle, the framework. So number 1, track and measure every step of the way. I've found that I've spoken to organizations and I've asked them, talk to me about the things that you've been doing. And they're like, well, every year we do this campaign, this fundraising campaign, this concert. And I'm like, okay, great. What's the ROI? No, actually, it's not that great. Why do you keep doing it every year? There's a real inertia that sets in when it comes to organization. They kind of press play on the things that they do every year, and they just do them over and over and over again. And no one's really looking. Is this working well? Is this resonating? What's the ROI? Are we building on ourselves? Look at what's working, what isn't working, discard what's not working, iterate, try new things, keep tracking and measuring, and really make sure that every bit of marketing that you do should build on the next thing. So if you're doing something and then it kind of resets because you're not following up, you're not being consistent about it, you're really not getting yourself very, very far. And it's most powerful when it becomes an organic level of growth. And that only happens with consistency and with an eye on the prize and with measuring. So set yourself, I would say, like at minimum 1 day a month where you have this like goal that you're looking at for your marketing efforts, whether it's some kind of like a, signups, additions to your list, number of intake calls, and then look at that goal. Like really, really be disciplined about looking at that goal and how all the different pieces of your marketing are coming into play towards that goal, and be really ruthless in cutting what's not working, because it's so easy for budgets to disappear if you're not doing that. Number 2, I touched on the stories. Your stories of transformation are your secret weapon. And if you're really doing something that's helping people, then it's something you really need to be capitalizing on. So what I suggest is keeping a story bank. Could be like a internal WhatsApp chat or Slack channel or email, but every time there's a really important story, write it up and share it with all the people that internally need to know it. And then you have this bank to tap into whenever you're running any kind of marketing effort. It'll be really easy for you to pull out your stories. And again, privacy is an issue. So if you need to change details, whatever it is that you need to do, but if you're not sharing impact, you're really not doing the most you can. And that's a really big shame. So I just want to emphasize again, how important it is to constantly be telling stories, and how important it is to keep your stories in a place where you can always easily access them. And then if you have an opportunity, let's say, somebody interviews on a podcast and they say, well, what's your favorite story? You'll be able to just pull one out of a hat. The last thing is be prepared to scale. I actually did a separate webinar on this topic, and I'm happy to share it with anybody, but basically it's double-edged sword marketing for a mental health organization, because you might already be at capacity, right? You need more money. But if you start marketing intentionally, and you're doing it right and it's working, all of a sudden there's going to be all of these people that are calling you. And what happens? What happens if you're close to capacity? You need to have a plan in place. And like I said, I have a webinar I can share the recording of to talk about it, but just make sure that if you're getting more calls than you used to because your marketing is working, it's a great thing, but just be prepared with a plan. Whether it's, keeping some kind of waiting list or referral to another organization, some kind of mentorship. There are different ideas that I have that I can share, but it is really important to just keep that in mind, that is the double-edged sword of marketing. Okay, that is really it. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm opening it up to questions now. I will be sharing by email additional resources that I can help with on this topic. And yeah, thank you so much. So I'm gonna stop sharing for the Q&A. Okay, so I have one question here. Feel free to raise your hand if you want to be promoted to a panelist, and I can put you on video. You can ask a question. And yeah, okay, so I have one question. What do you mean by consistent branding? That's something I mentioned when I was talking about AI imagery. So an image can have a brand. So think about, let's say, Target. Target's really good at this. You can be driving by a Target billboard, and even before you see that red bullet, you know it's Target because their imagery has a brand to it. It's always very bright, very sharp, very cheerful. Images that come from different places can have that. So if you're doing like one photo shoot and one stock photography and something someone took on their iPhone, the imagery is not going to have a brand to it. And that's a missed opportunity. If you're using AI, you can prompt it with the tone, what the brand of your imagery looks like, and then you can make sure everything is really, really consistent. And that can be so powerful, because then anytime someone has a touch point with your marketing, they're like, oh yeah, that's this organization. And that's something that's really difficult to achieve anywhere else. So I think that's really powerful. I think it's really something that we should be talking about and thinking about. Any other questions? Anybody want to put, okay, Esther Perlman, I will promote you to a panelist. Let me know if that worked. There we go. Esther, you're on mute. Just unmute yourself.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you? Thank you for joining me.
This is my second time joining you, and the first was so great, I figured I have to make the time to
Thank you.
hear what you have to say again. I wanted to just comment on one thing that you mentioned, because, and you had mentioned the idea of getting people to share their stories and how powerful that is. And so I do a lot of work for Kinefayim. I don't know if you're familiar with Kinefayim. Kinefayim deals with pregnancy loss. And we recently launched a new division, which is what my second part of this is about, which I wanted to ask. And one of the things that we wanted very much was for people to do video testimonials, like to take it on their phone. It should be very raw, very authentic, and really speak to the experience of a variety of women who've been helped. And how do we get people to do it? We actually just put it on our WhatsApp chat and people responded. And it's really getting a lot, people are really very moved by it. And we've had a lot of, a lot of people watching that and really being touched by it.
That's
So
amazing. Yeah, I think that organizations make assumptions about what people are willing to do. And when you just go out there and you ask, it could be very, very surprising. So that's amazing. That will go a long way.
it was really, really interesting to see how that evolved. My question is, like, in launching, so we've launched this new program. It's not a campaign. It's a permanent division of the organization. I'm just wondering, in terms of, you said that you always there has to be everything has to be tracked and measured. What I'm finding is it's extremely hard to get at numbers that pertain to our community. Like, I could get numbers out there in the general population about, open rates, click rates, recurring donors. I could get all that, but in the Frum community, first of all, we do give much more than the general population. So, like, those numbers are not necessarily accurate. The numbers that, how do I, like, what would you say are in the wake of launching such a thing, what would be the main places that I should be tracking to see, to best keep on, like, making flight corrections as we continue the program?
So when you're starting out, if you don't have a track record yet, your numbers may have to be just educated guesses. You say, this is how many people we think we could help in this given time. And that's your baseline. And what you want to do is grow it. So let's say if you're saying we're helping 10 people a month, our goal is, let's say in 6 months from now, we want to move to 60 people a month, or whatever number you think makes sense based on the rate of growth, the rate of the population that you're serving. Make your own numbers. And then as you get there, you can see whether they might be completely unrealistic. You might have underestimated, and you say, whoa, we're helping way more people than that. We should shift our goals to be more in alignment with what the potential is. So you can set your own numbers as your baseline, but then you keep an eye on them as you move along. Does that answer your question?
So maybe I didn't make my question clear. I'm looking more at getting people involved in the program, getting people to sign up, as opposed to the people that we're helping. I mean, the people we're helping, whoever comes to us, we help. It's not a question. We don't turn people away. So it's more that, like, in getting people, when we're trying to track the numbers of how effective the website is, and, like, which are the things that we should be looking at, and what would be my baseline with that?
So same idea. It's the same idea, whether it's people that you're helping or people you want to involve in any kind of capacity. You're starting from zero. So the first number that you put out is just going to be your wish list number. Realistic, but also a little bit of like a goal you want to stretch yourself. So if you think you can easily get 5, put it to 10. Start there. And then, you have the plan of all the things you're going to be doing. And then in a week, in a month, in 3 months, you keep looking back at that number and how close you are. If you're not even anywhere close, then you need to do 2 things at once. I would say you need to lower the goal a little bit and you need to change up the marketing efforts. If you're over the number, you say, you know what, we're not even scratching the potential here. We need to raise it. But I think whatever the goal is, you start with your baseline. As long as you keep looking at it and being very smart about it, these are your numbers. And then you just track it. Meaning numbers don't have to come from external data. There's very, like you mentioned, there's very little to look at. Make them internal, make them your numbers. You should know your numbers cold. Your audience, your growth potential, etc.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else want to ask a question? Okay, it looks like that's it. Thank you so much for joining. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to follow up with my email. And again, I really, really appreciate your time. I would love to provide more resources. It's such a passion of mine. And if you just bear with me for one more second. I don't have it. Okay, I don't have it handy. I wanted to post the link to the WhatsApp chat that I made, but I'm going to send it by email. I have all of your email addresses. Thank you so much for joining, and I'm going to do this again soon. So if you have any topics that you would want me to specifically address, then please let me know. Thank you so much, everybody.